All right, here's the story. I started doing stand-up comedy when I was 14. I'll never forget the first time I was on stage. The guy that introduced me was a guy named J.T. Newton. I'm 47. I can close my eyes and remember the introduction like it was yesterday. It went like this. Ladies and gentlemen, this next young man coming to the stage is starting his comedy career tonight. Who knows? We may be witnessing the birth of a star. Please welcome David Chappell. From the first time that I ever held a microphone, I was sure this was it. I knew I was home. I knew I had found my thing. And my God, man, I was a child. I got good. Matter of fact, I was good from the moment I started. And I'm not saying this to be a brag, I'm telling you the truth. These old niggas was in awe of me. How is this little boy so poised? They used to say. I was. I mean, you know, I got better, but I started out good. About a year into it, when I was 15 years old, I had written a joke during the AIDS epidemic about having a Goodyear condom. Something, I don't even remember the joke. Something about an industrial strength condom by Goodyear. I just remember all the comedians really liked that joke.
Henry has the lead.
And there was an older comedian. He came to me one night after the show, after he saw the joke, and he said, listen, I got an audition at another comedy club, and I was wondering, do you mind if I do that joke? I just want to borrow it. Now, I'm a kid. I don't know any better. I'm like, borrow it? Well, I guess, sure. Help your career. I let him do the joke. And then weeks later, I was waiting to go on, and he went on before me. And he did the joke. And after the show, I pulled him aside and I said, hey, man, I don't mind borrowing my jokes. You gotta give them back. I forgot to ask you, let me buy that joke for you for $50. And I said, man, I'd do it, but I'm just starting out. I need all this material. The more material I can accumulate, the faster I'll be able to make money for my work. I said, I can't do it. I want my joke back. I'll never forget this. Remember, I was a 15-year-old child. This guy was a grown-ass man. He stood up over me so I could see how big he was. And he said to me, really? I can just take it. And he did. I got scared. Because I was tired. Never forgot. I was 15 years old. I'm 47 now. I think about this all the time. When I look at my own kids and I see how young and innocent they are, I can't believe someone did that to me. And I don't think about it every day because that was the worst thing that happened to me. I think about it every day because that was the first time someone ever did that to me. But in my career, it has happened many, many times since. Someone would intimidate me or scare me and take something. He was right. I'll tell you another story. Now I'm 18 years old. I'm living in New York City, and I just finished my first road tour, which was a very difficult tour. I'll spare you the details. Now I'm back in New York, but my rent is paid, thank God. And I have $60 to my name, and a woman that I had met in Pittsburgh, a bad Dominican bitch, was coming to New York. She was gonna spend the weekend. Couldn't wait for her to get there. She was coming that evening. Remember, I only had $60 for a whole week to entertain a bad bitch. Now I'm walking through Greenwich Village, and I see something I've never seen before. 3-card Monte. You know what that is? Yeah, the guy had the whole thing. He had the 3 cards, and the crowd was Sometimes they win, sometimes they lose, but it was really exciting. I'm standing there watching it. I noticed while I'm watching them play this game that the red card, the one you're trying to find, had just a little bit. And I'm watching it and I'm like, yo, this guy doesn't seem to know that red card is bent. I'm gonna beat this motherfucker. And I walk up to the table and I said, let me play. And I put my last 60 down on the table and he starts to shuffle, find the red card. And I kept watching that bent card go around and kept make sure I put my eyes on that bent card. I stopped shuffling. He said, find the red card. I pointed to it with confidence. Here it is right here. And he flipped it over. And it was black. He took my money. I couldn't fucking believe it. How did this nigga do that? Was that magic or sorcery? I was confused. So you know what I did? I sat there and I watched him for a real long time play the game. And I realized that all those people who was doing all that hooting and hollering and betting, my God, they were his friends. They were in on the whole thing. I felt so wronged. I felt so stupid. And then the next sucker came up to the table and was about to put his money down. And I said, fuck that, man. Don't put your money there. All these niggas is in on it. It's true. And when I said that, the guy that was dealing, this motherfucker, snatched me up by my collar. Feel how strong he was when he grabbed me. I was a skinny little guy. He on me. The only reason he didn't, I'm sure, is because he saw the fear in me. And that fear, he looked at me. I saw his eyes go from and he looked at me like the way a father would look at a child. He said to me, "The man ever come between the names." Never forgot that either. Most niggas have to run the streets for years to learn a lesson that profound. Took me 2 seconds. Never get between somebody and their people. Taking a man's livelihood away from him is akin to killing him. Do you know why Prince, famous rock star, you know why he called himself the artist? He calls himself the artist because that's what they call us in our contracts. All these contracts. You should hear the terminology they say in these contracts. To use your name and likeness in perpetuity throughout the universe. Who the fuck could possibly know what that means? Nobody does. It's so complicated, in fact, that when you're a kid like me, you have to hire somebody to tell you what that means. And you sit down at a table and you do the contract game. That's how I got to Comedy Central. I signed the contract. And I signed the contract the way the 28-year-old expectant father that was broke signs a contract. I was desperate and needed a way out, and it wasn't good money, and it wasn't good circumstances, but what else am I gonna do? And all these whites who were sitting at that table told me, trust us, Dave, it's a good contract. And I looked around the table, and they all seemed to agree it was a good contract. But what if it was like that game of 3-card Monte? What if they were all friends and I didn't know it? bag of money was Iceberg's money in the first place. What was I talking about? What was I trying to tell you?
1 minute remaining.
Last week,
Their time is running
2
out.
weeks ago,
Exit
whenever
out.
it was, I call Lauren Michaels and I tell him, okay, I'll do it. I'll do Saturday Night Live on election night. And the day I made that phone call, the day I committed to it, it gets announced that Netflix is streaming Chappelle's show. Not just Netflix. HBO Max is streaming it too. I'll tell you another story about
30
HBO.
seconds. We are out of time.
No, hear me out. Did you know, before Chappelle's show was at Comedy Central, I pitched that show to HBO. I told them what I wanted to do. Now, these are executives. All they have to do is say, yeah, we'll take it, or no, thank you, we won't. But they didn't say either of those things. They went too far. They said, literally, what do we need you for? That's what they told me. Is they kicked me out of the office. What do we need you for? And here we are, all these years later, and they're streaming the very show that I was pitching to them. So I'm asking them, what do you need me for? People think I made a lot of money for Chappelle's show. When I left that show, I never got paid. They didn't have to pay me because I signed the contract. But is that right? I found out that these people were streaming my work and they never had to ask me or they never had to tell me. Perfectly legal because I signed the contract. But is that right? I didn't think so either. That's why I like working for Netflix. I like working for Netflix because when all those bad things happened to me, that company didn't even exist. And when I found out they were streaming Chappelle's show, I was furious. How could they not know? So you know what I did? I called them and I told them that this makes me feel bad. And do you want to know what they did? They agreed that they would take it off their platform just so I could feel better. That's why I fuck with Netflix, because they paid me my money, they do what they say they're gonna do, and they went above and beyond what you could expect from a businessman. They did something just because they thought that I might think that they were wrong. And I do. I think if you are fucking streaming that show, you're fencing stolen goods. They stole that from me. They just took it. And I'm not up here trying to tell you guys that I believe that Comedy Central gave me a raw deal just because I'm black. I believe that they gave me a raw deal because this fucking industry is a monster. It's the same monster that these Me Too bitches was trying to tell you about. But they hate the monster for how it fucks. And I hate that monster for how it eats. But my God, man, it's the same monster. When I quit the show, all my friends would say, well, fuck them, Dave. Why don't you just do Chappelle's show at another network? Yeah. And why doesn't a slave run from one plantation to another plantation because the master over there might be nicer? My God, man, I was trapped. You know what? Tell you the truth. I've even thought about coming back and doing another Chappelle show. Well, but if I do, I can't call it Chappelle's show because my name and likeness is being used by them in perpetuity throughout the universe. It's in the contract. supposed to do this in my business. I'm out here doing something that nobody else in this business is doing. I'm telling you something that you need to know. I'm trying to explain to you what you're seeing. You don't understand what you're seeing. I am publicly flogging a network. And I know that this network and everything, they watching me and they saying, why, it's so complicated. It feels good to be flogged publicly. Believe me, I know. I know exactly how that feels. When I quit my show, they said I was crazy. What was crazy about it? I just didn't want to do it anymore. They said I smoked crack. I was a devout person. I didn't smoke or drink. But I do now, bitch, because you ruined my fucking life. Now it's their turn. It's their first nigga left. And I'm honored to give it to them. They're gonna pay me for this show. I called my agent. I said, is there anything I can do about this show? And he said, no. Well, fuck you too. You want something done right?
We need a
Yes, you got it. So I'm not going to the agents. I'm coming to my real boss. I'm coming to you. I'm begging you. If you ever like it, if you ever think there was anything worthwhile about it, I'm begging you. Please don't watch that show. I'm not asking you to boycott any network. Boycott me. Boycott Chappelle's show. Do not watch it unless they pay me. If you're a shareholder at Viacom, then I'm talking to you. Because all that shit that they do to us, well, they do everything for their shareholders. That's what they told me. So if you're a shareholder in that company, tell them it's wrong. If you don't believe that it's wrong, then fuck you too. You should know what's in the hot dogs you eat. Now, there's probably a bunch of people at Comedy Central and Viacom and all these places that have no idea what I'm talking about. They've all either quit or been fired or got Me Too'd or something. Them niggas is gone. And there's a whole bunch of new young people there, and they're probably looking like, what is he talking about? They may not actually know what the fuck happened to me. So I'll tell you what I'm talking about. Go downstairs to your accounting department, open the books, see what that show made, and look at what you paid me. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You're going to pay me. I am inviting you to come with me and work with me. And let's fight against that terrible, terrible feeling that you made me feel together. We can fight together and work this thing with Chappelle's show out. Or I can just take it. Thank you.
And we lost our connection with Africa, which means this is why the Garvey period was so important, because he was restoring that connection. We didn't fully understand it then, we don't fully understand it now. For people to exist without a nationality, an identification with a piece of land, he is a legless man. Not only part of his body is inoperative, part of his mind is inoperative, part of his psychic being is not that. Because for a human being to feel whole, he must identify with land. And he must understand something. That is the difference between being a subject and a citizen. It is in this period that we became confused between the two. Up until the end of the 19th century, we knew we were not citizens of the United States, no matter what the paper said. We knew we were subjects. And because we knew we were subjects, we had our fighting spirit intact. And this was an international thing, not something applicable to black people in the United States. But those in the Caribbean were doing the same thing, understanding the fakery of their emancipation. We begin to understand the fakery of our emancipation. And the Africans had already understood the fakery of the change between chattel slavery and colonialism, a more sophisticated form of slavery. Now, in a book called The Betrayal of the Negro, Rayford Logan has a chapter called The Nadir, or the lowest theory. Now, the preface to the Booker T. Washington's Killer is the Nadir, the lowest spiritual period, the lowest economic period in our history in this country. All right. 1874, 1875, we had been betrayed. The Southern troops, the federal troops had been withdrawn from the South, permitting the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, the Knights of the White Vanilla, and all other racist organizations. Both the North and the South had betrayed us in favor of a vote for Tilton B. Hayes, the new president. Many of the safeguards had been withdrawn. And no one wanted to talk about the promise of 40 acres and the mule. No one wanted to talk about this anymore. Now, had we gotten the 40 acres and the mule, and had we not lost feeling of the land, we would be the feeders of America today, because this came at a time before the immigrant migration. It came at a time when whites did not want to farm. And had we mastered the land, we could have controlled what this nation ate. And we would have been moderately wealthy doing so, because that means we would be controlling some other things. All right. It was a period of industrialization in the United States. This is the period of the Vanderbilt, the rise of the Vanderbilt, the Harriman, the railroad people, the Rockefellers, and Carnegie, the steel people, Andrew Mellon, and Carnegie. Now these men were rich thugs. Make no mistake about it, they were thugs. These thugs now wanted respectability. And this white philanthropy, now they've been told that you get a better press by giving to the Negro. So they discovered us at a time when none of us had any big money to give to endow anything. We had already built the independent black church and large institutions. We have built more independent institutions than any African people living outside of Africa. Not because we are more industrial, and not because we've got more money, and not because we've got more brains, but because the kind of thugs white thugs who control the United States deprived us of so much, either we had to build it ourselves or do without it altogether. And so the church could not be just a church. The church was a community center. Part of the day, the church was the school. And occasionally in trouble, the church was the hiding place. And the church played a major role in the physical protection of black people, because the one person that they would partly listen to was the black minister. All right, now, we're approaching this period now when white philanthropy want to know what to do with us. Bishop Turner has not only arose, but Bishop Turner is on the warpath. Bishop Turner has already made one of his back to Africa trips. Now, he actually took people back to Africa. More people went under Bishop Turner than under Garvey. We've forgotten Bishop Turner. It's unfortunate we've forgotten most of our heroes. Bishop Turner hated what the country's done to his people so much, he would mount an American flag in the pulpit before his sermon. And for 15 minutes, starting with the statement, "This flag ain't nothing but a GD rag," he would preach 15 minutes against the flag and the betrayal of his people and the lies that some of telling his people. Then he would calm himself down and pick up his Bible and preach the son. Now, Bishop Turner was on the radio. White people wanted to know who is the leader of these radical people. Who can I communicate to calm them down? Not getting any answer, they decided they would create a leader. And they would anoint him. It's the beginning of the age of the anointed leader. Don't judge Booker too fast now, because Booker ran as many games on them as they ran on him, and got millions for education while doing it, and hated that guy. To read Up From Slavery, this is not reflected in his book Up From Slavery. It's reflected in his personal letters. Now 10 volumes of his letters have been published. Now white decided to tap this young man and prepare him for leadership, and they alerted the editors of all the white newspapers to start writing editorials about him and literally deliver him to us as our leader. There was an exhibition in Atlanta, the Atlanta Cotton Exhibition. Booker T. Washington was going to be the keynote speaker. Though he was the keynote speaker, he had to arrive and come through a Jim Crow door and wait in a Jim Crow section until it was his time to speak. And when he started speaking, though we were in the 19th century, when he finished, we were in the 20th century. The troubles of the 20th century. This evening I've been trying to find the actual speech. I must have at least 6 copies in the house and couldn't find one. Booker T. Washington began his speech. His speech is all things to all people. If you want to listen to a con game, Booker T. Washington's famous Atlanta speech is one of the most unique con speeches ever made. He's catering to the whites, of the southerners, he's catering to the northerners. have his clincher. He's telling the blacks that it's better to run a truck farm than to do all of this stuff, political speech. This pleases the white. Get us out of politics. He's padding both sides. That best, black, best to make $1 a day. $1 a day was pretty good salary for a black man in that period. Then to sit next to white at the office. He's telling the whites, we don't want social equality. All we want is a job. They like it. Now, Booker began to tell the North, build factories in the South. We will not drag like the immigrant pastor of the North. He calls a foreigner who found labor unions an ingrate, an all-black factor. He tells the South, be good to us, we're your friends. We'll not only nurse your children, took care of you in days of old. Then his clincher, we even followed you with tear-dripped eyes to your grave. He got the South now. Now he got the South, he got the North, he got part of the black. And he continues to speak. His speech now is an appeal to all of them. And he tells a story about a man at sea, shouting to all the ships that pass, water, water, give me water. Finally a ship shouts out to him, cast down your bucket where you are. But you sail out of the salty sea, you're now in the Gulf Stream, and there's clear water all around you. Just cast down your bucket. Drink the beautiful stuff. Now he's telling both the black and the South, the Northerners, invest in the South. Invest some faith in the South. And he glances quietly over the audience. He had come through the exhibition to say that caliber of a race is known by what it displays, and said that we have on display in this exhibition some quilts and some of our agricultural products, and shows how far we've come from slavery, and also shows how much we need from you. Now the white money men open up their pockets. If that's all they can do, I better give them a few nickels that they can do a little better than that. Now he tells blacks that if you're going to be a servant, be a good servant and get a good salary. Now what he's saying is practical, and it was high politics for that day. Brilliant politics for the day. Finally, he finishes the speech, saying that if all these things are achieved, we shall have a new heaven and a new earth. Couldn't be better than that. Now, amid all these applause, blacks sitting in the balcony, you notice that some blacks are crying. Some blacks waving their hands. Oh no, Book, it ain't that good. Come on, knock it off, bro. And some of them come up to him and some refused to shake his hand. Why this went unnoticed? Black rejection of what he said, because blacks knew it was partly fantasy. he was running a game that couldn't be that good. After Booker T. Washington's speech, many blacks began to vote with their feet, began to leave the South. And when you any history of the migration of blacks from the South, it began in earnest after this speech, because blacks suspected that something was going wrong. Now, white editorial writers made Booker T. Washington the leader of Black America. They made him the leader of Black America, declared that he was, and white philanthropy began to filter all the, not just for Tuskegee, the money that any black got for education had to come through Booker Washington. He was literally the dictator of Black America. Now, I'm not so much against dictators if something good is being dictated, and sometime he dictated something good. All right, Booker Washington, this was his era. It is starting now. But what you have to do is to look at what happened not only in Black America, but what happened in the totality of the African world in the years between the time he made that speech, 1895 and 1901. Those brief years, 1896, a light-skinned person who could pass for white and who'd been passing most of the time, got on a train and got in the white section, sit in the white section. But the conductor who knew his family wanted him to go to the black section. This is the Percy versus Ferguson case. After this case, the Supreme Court said everything had to be separate so long as it was equal. It was never equal. And the intent was never to make it equal. Now, to show you the difference between the British and the United States, the British are oppressors with style. You're just as dead when no matter which one kills you now. Let's get that clear. They're both murderers. Only the British got style. Well, style won't bring you back alive if they kill you. All right. The British said that not only justice must be done, but it must appear to have been done. The American won't even tell that lie. They don't even try to cover it up with words. They're blatant about it. They say it must be separate but have to be equal. And they, from then on, they began to make Jim Crow laws. The schools are not equal. Nothing is equal. The accommodation is not equal. In some places, there's no accommodation at all. There's some cities where there is no black theater. There is no black school of consequence. And when you've got a black school, many times those schools got the hand-me-down books from the white school. I know that for sure because I went to one. So nothing was equal. Now, most of the Jim Crow laws were passed in that 5-year period between 1895 and 1900. There was a law in Mississippi saying that a black woman couldn't appear in on any of the main streets unless she had an apron and a cap on, indicating she was a maid. And she couldn't go into any theater unless she was a nurse watching
Capture UAV online.
some white kid. So, because this custom spread to other states, many blacks who wanted to see a given movie at a white theater, they put on a cap and put on an apron and grab some little little white boy and say they're watching him winning the theater. Integrated a generation ahead of integration. That's neither here nor there. Now, 1896 again, let's look at Africa. 1896 in Africa, the British are trying to move into the hinterland of Ghana. All they've got is the coast.
Copy, Jaguar 3.
They've been there over 100 years, but all they've got to control is the coast. They try to, then they move in, level penalties on the then king, Prempeh. Finally, the Akan people decide that they're not in a position to fight this war. Best to let the king go into exile and save the nation. So they bring, the king comes out, genuflects to the British and go into exile. And some British sergeant grabs the king by the neck of his a king whose lineage goes back further than the oldest king lineage of Europe, over 1,000 years, traceable, pushes the king's face down on the shoes of the British government, along with his mother. Purpose, humiliation. And he turns and says in his language, "O kinsman, is this necessary?" And the British exile him to a dungeon, Elmina Castle. Subsequently, they sent him to Seychelles Island in the Red Sea. But this is the period of the exiling of African kings who oppose colonialism. The king of Dahomey was exiled at the same time. Sekou Touré's grandfather, Samori, was exiled at the same time. Several of the Zulu kings were exiled at the same time. The politics of exile has become close to the end of the century. They became more aware of our possibility claiming freedom than we did. Now, the same year he made the speech, a young man from Great Barrington, Massachusetts, having finished fifth, was now at Harvard. 1 year after the speech, this young man was so brilliant, he wrote the first book in the Harvard series. One of the first books published by Harvard, written by a student named W.E.B. Du Bois. His book is Suppression of the Slave Trade to the African slave trade to the United States. Still worth reading. Statistics are good. And because we assume that the difference of opinion between W.E.B. Du Bois and Washington was a fight, we figured that we got to get on one side or the other. We wanted to fight at all. It was a difference of opinion. We can have difference of opinion without converting them into fight. Du Bois, Great Barrington, Massachusetts, growing up in a predominantly white town, community, thought he'd go to Harvard because it was a socialist type of town. The town was incorporated, so everybody in the town owned the town. So 10 of the most brilliant young men from the town, high school, was automatically sent to Harvard at the expense of the town. W.E.B. Du Bois was one of them. They didn't send him to Harvard, they sent him to Fisk.
Calling to base.
But it was the finest thing that ever happened to him because up until that point, he wasn't aware of black people as a people belonging to him. But when he got down in Tennessee and had to ride Jim Crow cars and eating Jim Crow restaurants, he saw the light of day and he said that he would devote the rest of his life to race work. He thought racial prejudice was based on ignorance.
Copy. Jaguar 30 en route for
It's based on the containment of power. There's a whole lot of brilliant people who are as prejudiced as they can be. A whole lot of people graduate all kind of schools, read all kind of books, still prejudiced. It is based partly on ignorance, but only part. All right. And we move to the end of this century in the Caribbean islands, the Caribbean radicals that were never tolerated in the Caribbean islands then or now, because the Caribbean mind flourishes best away from home.
Jaguar 30.
Still do.
Bingo fuel. Recalling to base.
The Caribbean radicals were restless. In Jamaica, Albert Thorne, J. Albert Thorne, Robert Love, these were the people who laid the basis for the emergence of Garvey. It's about to be run out. Marischal was propagating in Grenada. He would later be one of the early advocates of independence in the Caribbean islands. Then a young man in Barbados, H. Sylvester Williams, had found the Pan-African League. Near the end of the century, he would call the first Pan-African Congress. So the ideas of Pan-Africanism, the formal ideas, would be coming from the Caribbean. The three best-known Pan-Africanists all came from Trinidad. H. Sylvester Williams, who started it, George Padmore, who was the active theoretician of Pan-Africanism and one of its finest writers, C.L. Aura James, still alive, living in London. Now, why is it that these three Trinidadians, fathers of Pan-Africanism, never could unite Trinidad? Because their theories at home wasn't that respected or accepted. Something which I have said before and have been saying through the years is that the Caribbean islands always produce men of vision whose vision of life is larger than the island that produced them. And in order to flourish, they've got to leave home. Because there's no space for those kind of large ideas. The British programmed into a limited mentality based on dependency on them. America let your mentality flourish, then they frustrate it based on your dependency on them. Too many times we argue over the relative merit of oppressors instead of arguing against both oppressors we start asking, my oppressor was better than your oppressor. Now, Booker T. Washington is literally the kingpin of the lot in Black America now. 1908, Sylvester Williams called his Pan-African Congress in London. W.E.B. Du Bois attended. Now the global importance of African problem is moving. And the Booker T. Washington program has spread to Africa. No matter what you might think of the Booker T. Washington program in the United States, his concept of training for self-reliance, for self-maintenance, was what the Africans wanted and needed and still do. He had the more practical program in education. And because he told us to go light on politics until we finish our houses and our streets, and learn how to make our own clothes, we assumed that he was telling us to abstain from politics. But he was saying that once you own a house, and once you own the brickyard, the furniture, the bricks for the house, once you're making your own shoes, once you've mastered the real estate in your own community, nobody's going to have to tell you that you got to be political in order to protect it. This thought is going to come automatic. So all he was thinking about is that Du Bois was premature. The Du Bois idea was coming a little ahead of the readiness of the people to absorb the idea and work with it. That coming out of slavery less than 50 years, we needed basic things. But some of these basic things we don't have today. We still need basic things. We can create an industry making our shoes. We should start with a pocket hanger. I said, if you want to make a locomotive, start with a safety pin. If you can't make a safety pin, give it up. But what Booker T. Washington was training for at Tuskegee, the point we missed then and now, was nation management. This is what he was really about beneath all of this. And yet, he was the only person that could go to talk to America and get large sums of money. Andrew Carnegie thought so much of Booker T. Washington, he would put $500,000 in the bank and tell Booker T. Washington to go each year and draw the interest. He can have he leaves us $500,000 there. You go each year and draw the interest. It started at $22,000. $22,000 in around 1900. That's about equivalent of $100,000 today in buying power, maybe more. And all he had to do is to go there and present a note and figure it out. So quite a few people giving money to Tuskegee gave money to Booker T. Washington directly. So Booker T. Washington did have a private fortune on the side that he could manipulate. He began to buy up like this, special newspapers. He established a spy system. If a preacher preached a sermon, anti-Booker T. Washington sermon, The summary of the summons will be in the mail on its way to Booker the next day. And if you wanted a streetcar conductor job in Cincinnati, the whites wanted to know, is it all right with Booker? If it wasn't all right with Booker, you didn't get the job. And yet, he delivered a lot behind this educational dictator. Yet, the real opposition to Booker T. Washington did not come from Du Bois. The real opposition to Booker T. Washington came from a man in Boston that we call the Boston Brahmin, being high caste, high class. William Monroe Clarke. Among those Boston almost white blacks, I call the Light Brigade. Money by virtue of having a white father. Home, Harvard graduates. They're part of the town with Du Bois, Western friends. All the necessities. He married into the Light Brigade, and she had money. And yet he would exhaust most of this money in the struggle for black rights. He began his fight against Booker T. Washington in his newspaper, the Boston Guardian. He gave no quarter, he asked no quarter. He fought him till the day he died. He said that we need an alternative. We need not be locked to one man and one method. He had nothing against the educational policies of Booker T. Washington that was basically good then and now. But he thought the political views were terrible, and that Booker T. Washington paid too high a price for what he got from the whites. For what he got from the whites, Booker T. Washington was silent on lynching, silent on a whole lot of things. Silent on the mistreatment of blacks, silent on the famous Brownsville raid. We come to that later. Monroe Trotter thought that this was paying too much. When Booker T. Washington comes to Boston 1903 to lecture in a church, Trotter starts noise in the church, started a protest meeting right in the church, got thrown out and got in jail, came out and started picketing the next place Booker T. Washington spoke. Showed no mercy. Trotter was one of the most brilliant black journalists we've ever produced in this country.
We've taken control.
Along with Trotter, would also merge another journalist, too often forgotten, T. Thomas Fortune. T. Thomas Fortune supported Booker T. Washington and criticized him. Near the end of his life, he was one of the editors of God's Negro World. Brilliant journalist. We had journalists then, the lack of which we don't have one today. We have regret.
Capture and hold the objectives. Security B.
If we had those kind of journalists, they would be editorially on the case, especially about the housing condition, the boarded up houses, and the whole planned shrinkage when they literally planned to run poor people out of New York City anyway, black and white. They would be on these cases. But we don't have them. We don't have them anymore. All right, 1903. W.E.B. Du Bois would write A small masterpiece. Be a collection of his essays. Souls of Black folk. Still worth reading. Get a cheap edition because it's being sold everywhere. And not to have read Souls of Black folk is a disservice to you as a person that was a member of the African race. We call it the gift of Black folk. This man was a monumental giant. The finest intellect we have produced in the whole of the Western world. All right, now, W.B. Du Bois started his teaching career. He did not dislike Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington had sent him a letter asking him to come to teach at Tuskegee. He wrote 2 books with Booker T. Washington, still in existence. But the people at Wilberforce had sent him a letter earlier, and the people at Wilberforce was offering him, please listen, for a year's work, $950, and Tuskegee was offering him $900. So he went to Wilberforce, where he got into a little trouble. W.B. Du Bois always, he was a religious man, but he questioned the overuse of it all and the misuse by people lacking sincerity. So he came into a meeting at Wilberforce, a student meeting, being the senior professor there, and one of the few adults there, one of the students announced that Professor Du Bois will lead us in prayer. He said, no, I won't. My kind of praying will get the school closed. That's a Presbyterian school. It was a church school. He almost lost his job. He didn't last for 2 years there anyway. And he writes about the professors who are so smug, they would come to the table and speak to you in using Latin. And you didn't speak good Greek and Latin, you didn't rate that. You imagine black professors coming at a breakfast table conversing in Greek and Latin. That's why he rule off of some African language. Greek and Latin. And if you can't do it right, you're probably not qualified to be a professor. Your contract will probably not be renewed. He was, although Du Bois was a snob himself, he thought that was taking the cheap. So, all right, now he goes to Atlanta to begin his teaching. And some white woman who had given some money to Atlanta in the second year. They had a great black president, John Hope. Blonde, blue-eyed, black. There's quite a few around during that period. The Walter White type. She was going to give so much money to Atlanta with the condition that he fired Du Bois. And he said that, well, keep your money, I'll keep my possessions. So John Hope became Du Bois' defender and first president. Du Bois had remembered that there were times he needed some defenders. Because when they had found the Negro Academy, Kummel and other blacks, came into the meeting. First place you want to know why you there. an academy without women membership. They were willing to let her in and shut her up. And so after she got in, and she said that you're talking about poetry and Keith and Shirley and all these other poets, and they've been lynching people wholesale in this country. I want you to sign my call for the end of lynching. So naturally they did not. Because she's a woman with some money, she hired whites to join the Ku Klux Klan and to take down the name of the members and give them to her. And she published it. And every time there was a lynching, she had a white spy to go to the lynching and tell her who was there. And she published a book called A Little Red Book on Lynching. Then they drove her out of the
objectives here. Taking Alpha, stand by.
She went to Chicago, opened up a newspaper there.
Securing Charlie.
Married a black man named Barnett. And she had to tell him that
Friendly sentry gun
her name is
deployed.
Ida Wells. Everybody knows that I'm your wife. I respect this fact, but professionally I am Ida Wells. He said, baby, I don't care what you call yourself. So long as it is clearly understood that you and I
have the advantage.
go together and nobody else. It lasted the rest of her life. It lasted until the day she died. So that one must have been pretty good. The daughter's still, daughter-in-law is still alive. All right, now, what we are up against now is a change in temperament in the awareness in the United States of the great change in America.
Enemy KIA.
1905, W.E.B. Du Bois discovered that his friend Monroe Trotter is in trouble. And he goes to Boston to see what he can do for his old friend. He's been protesting again, leading picket lines again. Whites threatened to kill him again. He just came out of jail again. He's exhausted most of his family money by now, trying to hold together the Boston Guardian. And if you could ever go to a library, you can see it on microfilm. Read some of those editorials. Blacks don't write that way anymore. Don't do it. Don't think that way anymore. We lost something in the 20th century that we brought into the 20th century. Held for a few years and lost it. Spirit of challenge.
Personal radar drone standing by.
W.E.B. Du Bois and some other radicals
That gave him something to think about. Good work.
call a meeting, go to Niagara Falls and couldn't get hotel accommodation. Finally go to the Canadian side and get a hotel over there. And they call that movement the Niagara Movement. This is the forerunner of the NAACP. All right, now, they begin to hold meetings every year. But 1906, a monumental year for Black America. We need to pause here for 1906, a major turning point in white reaction to Black resurgence. 1906, a riot in Atlanta. W.E.B. Du Bois trying to get across Atlanta to contact some of his good white folks to stop the riot. On his way, he goes to a black community. The whites have closed out all the stores, cut out the lights, cut off the water. And he goes to a black community where the black ruffians, pool room types, open up the stores, giving away the food, women and children, preface given to pregnant women. Blacks climb the telephone poles until they find out the lever that they can turn on to get the lights back on and get them back on. They don't have those spikes on that, you know, the other men used to climb the poles. They just climb with that normal feet. Just straight up that pole. Turn those lights back on. The fishermen manholes until they find out how to get the water back on. So when Du Bois sees this, he sees a bravery he's never seen in black folks. And these are common, ordinary street people. That I call the Bo Diddley syndrome, the Bo Diddley type, pool room type. Du Bois develops a respect for ordinary people he never in life had. Now he's beginning to discover that his so-called talented 10, the educated black, not only have no talent, have no nerve either. But down there on the street, Bo Diddley and his friends, you've got a fighting force. And you've got nerve and skill. And that street education has some value. And they're using it. They don't care what white's gonna do when they come back and find that all the food in their stores has been given away. They ain't worried about that. You close the store, we need stores, we need groceries. We open them up and give a grocery away. W.E.B. Du Bois is learning. 1906 again. Brownsville, Texas. They assigned 3,000 black soldiers to a post in Brownsville. The whites began to grumble. They don't want them there. There's only about 6 black families in the town. Their rough huge survey proved it was maybe no more than 4 or 6 single black women that they could ask the obvious questions when the obvious feeling comes up. So they now assume that these questions will be asked to white women. And now they're gonna try to get the blacks out. Bunch of white hoodlums blacken their face and shoots up the town so that the blacks could be blamed for it. And when the black soldiers hears about this and accidentally a stray bullet hits the bartender and he dies. When the blacks at the post hears about this and hears that they are accused falsely, they said that if they're going to accuse us of shooting up the town, we might as well go there and shoot it up for real. Now they got little houses. I mean, a house is a small county. They got all kind of pistols, all kind of shotgun rifles. So they go and shoot up the town. They don't kill nobody. Knock off windows, and, and hinges off the doors, and there's some nicks in the buildings of that town today. With that little house, you would knock a corner off a building. Powerful little cannon. Generally, you see them riding behind a small vehicle. I guess it's military down uniform. But a howitzer is a very effective small weapon. When you unload a howitzer on a house, you know it's been hit. Now they start a trial. And many of the blacks were sentenced to 99 years, some sentenced to be hung. But being sentenced to be hung for something they didn't do, they began to appeal. Some of these blacks are the same blacks who had fought with Teddy Roosevelt at San Juan Hill. He was the famous Rough Rider. Opened the way for Teddy Roosevelt at San Juan Hill. And they write, he's been president. They write and he no response. And he signs an order that puts him in jail. 99 years for most of them. Few were hung. All right. The appeal is now to Booker T. Washington and Du Bois. Here's what both Booker T. Washington and Du Bois did wrong. Both of them asked for clemency. You ask for clemency when the person has committed a wrong, you ask to forgive them. That's almost a confession. When they could have asked and should have asked for justice. Now, Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois' opinion of the Brownsville raid was about the same and wrong. Booker Washington took no public stand. He did take a stand because we have the letters that he wrote to Roosevelt reminding him that these are the men who saved your life in the Spanish-American War. But why he never said anything public, Booker T. Washington paid a terrible price for all that money he got from whites. He never took a public stand against it. We took a lot of private stands, and now we got the documents are available. W.E.B. Du Bois, Monroe Trotter still continue to meet with the Niagara movement. A white woman named Mary White Overton asked to attend the meeting. She pieced the whole thing, wrote down what she wanted to, getting the ideas together. And in 1909, there was a terrible lynching in Springfield, Illinois. And she called for white radicals and liberals to come together. It was mostly white liberals, mostly Jewish families with legal families, lawyer families. Now you see now with the making of the NAACP, you think it's yours. You think again. In the last copy of the crisis, which I just read today, there's a long article questioning the wisdom of the continuation of black schools. Because now that we have access to the mainstream. A people must have institutions that they control. We don't control Harvard, and no matter how many of us go to Harvard, we will never control Harvard, or Yale, or Columbia. All right. Booker T. Washington continues under attack by Monroe Trotter. Finally, a meeting is held at Harper's Ferry, where John Brown made his raid. Mary White Overton has copied as much as she wants now. She has the basic program for the NAACP taken verbatim in the Niagara movement. And she called liberal whites together to underwrite the establishment of the NAACP. Then she invites blacks to join on her terms. Du Bois becomes a member of the board, and she invites so many members of the former Niagara movement to join. Monroe Trotter is now against both W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker Washington. He tells W.E.B. Du Bois that these whites are going to have their organization no matter what we do, so let them. But we need an all-black organization that we finance and that we control, that they are not forever watching over and directing. And you need to bring your considerable talent and your name into the creation of an all-black organization. W.E.B. Du Bois rejected the plea. His rationale was that they were going to make him editor of the Crisis magazine. It hadn't had a name then because he gave it the name. They're going to give him research money, and he could continue at Atlanta as a teacher. So, because this was attractive to W.E.B. Du Bois, he turned down Trotter's offer. We would have been a different people in the United States had W.E.B. Du Bois listened to Trotter and used his talent to find an all-black finance-run organization that the whites could not influence and could not touch. Now, this man from Boston had nothing to gain. He had nothing to gain by being in black struggle. His problem was partly solved. He was almost white, and he had money, and a Harvard education, and access to a decent job. He didn't have to come into struggle at all. But his explanation is that faith dictated that I would play this role and take over this mission. 1909, the NAACP has get well underway. Booker T. Washington stands astride black life so well from 1895 when he made his speech to 1950 when he died, that the social history of black America is the history of our reaction to one man, Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington thought that the founding of the NAACP would offend some whites and spoke against it. But there was a brilliant black woman, Mary Church Terrell. She was married to a black judge in Washington. There'd been a play on it. It was on TV. Oz and Ruby played it. Very good. Mary Church Terrell was one of the forerunners of the black women of protest. She was picketing in the White House, Congress, picketing. Here again was the first white brigade that didn't have to be in trouble. That was the daughter of Robert Church of Tennessee, a black millionaire. She'd gone to finishing school in Switzerland. Went to Germany, spoke German like a native. One of the best educated women over there. When she married Terrell tried to discourage her from attending the first meeting of the NACP, mainly because Booker T. Washington had sent Terrell a letter telling Terrell he's up for a higher position as a judge in Washington. And if his wife, if he didn't control his radical wife, he might do him more harm than good. And so when Judge Terrell had to face his wife, Mary Clarke, she said that this was a period of something, and she said that she didn't like this person because Booker T. Washington said to her dinner table to told black jokes. She didn't consider that funny at all. And so she had a black scholar thought that we needed an alternative to Booker T. Washington. And so when Judge Terrell brought up to her about this meeting, the question whether he should attend it, she told him, I am your wife now. The laws of this country are so restrictive where women are concerned. You can reduce me to slavery. If you order me not to attend the meeting, I will not attend. But from then on, I will not be your wife or act like your wife. I will act like what I am. I am a slave, and that's the way I will act in this house. So he said, all right, Mary, you go to your meeting. You go to your meeting, and I'll see if I can explain to you. You went to the meeting. He was also associated with Susan B. Anthony, the suffrage, one of the women fighting for women's vote. Of course, the fact that Susan B. Anthony was also racist is something we don't have time to talk about now. White women who live today are racist. It has nothing to do with black people. Black women are all right, but let's need to get into that. But 1911, this is really the turning point. Booker T. Washington. 1911, Booker T. Washington came to New York City from a speaking tour. He stopped to see the then Secretary of Treasury of Tuskegee, a white man. The man lived in the 80s. The man had not gotten Booker T. Washington's letter, so he was out. Booker T. Washington went into one address in the 80s and thought, well, maybe it's next door. He went in next door and started looking in the mailboxes, and a white ruffian named Urick came out and beat up Booker T. Washington and went into court and accused Booker T. Washington of coming upstairs and looking through the peephole at his wife and calling her I.C. Now he wasn't even upstairs at all. But the court didn't pay much attention to him. And Booker T. Washington suddenly awaked him. He said, my white friends in the South wouldn't have treated me this way. He was right, they wouldn't. He was a piece of property. He was doing their bidding, and he was containing blacks to keep blacks from cutting their throats. They were going to protect him because they needed him to protect them. No, they gave him a special car. He didn't ride no Jim Crow car. A special railroad car for Booker T. Washington. They just attached it onto on the train. No, he didn't ride across this country no Jim Crow car. Booker was special. Now you gonna fight Jim Crow? His personal case is taken care of. Now this Eureka case knocked some sense in Booker Washington's head, and he realized that light skin and catering to whites ain't gonna make you white. And that when it comes down to power, you're just one of us too. Light skin and all. And so Booker T. Washington began to call in different blacks he had been trying to destroy through his spy system. Called one who wouldn't even come. The great Caribbean radical, Hubert B. Harrison. Pity we don't know much about him. That was one of the most brilliant men to come out of the Caribbean. Didn't even go to the 6th grade in the Caribbean. Here's a man read so many books, was so brilliant. He taught at Columbia University. And Columbia didn't want to admit that a man of this caliber was teaching, so they paid him as a janitor.
Back to the mine.
Paid him as a handyman. Taught at the Henry George School. Wrote a book still worth reading, In Africa Awaits. Wrote several books. Started and developed the concept of speaking from the street ladder in Harlem. Came to the United States in 1903, died in 1927. When he worked briefly at the post office,